Shut up and sit down.
Welcome to the Answers Yes podcast, where we will explore the cause and effect of just saying yes in your everyday life or in business. I will dig into topics that are not just stimulating, but will challenge you to be better in everything you do. The podcast is based on the simplicity of saying yes to opportunities you might encounter every single day. I'm your host, Jim Riley. Join me in my first series titled Blue Collar Redefined. Hey, thanks for listening to today's podcast. Really appreciate the support. You know, you come across a lot of people in your lifetime, and some just resonate more than others. And I think that's one of the great joys I have with this podcast is the opportunity to meet so many people, whether it's over the phone or in person, and learn about their stories and their struggles and where they've been in life. And I just feel so blessed to have a group of people that I know just a little bit more about each one of them and their lives. And I hope you're enjoying the same process that I have, and that's learning through others and their trials and tribulations. And today's no exception to that. Our guest today, Jax, I met along the way. And just for some reason, upon our meeting, I just connected with him, and I really enjoyed our time, and I learned more and more about him. And if you take the time to ask questions about people and get to know them a little bit, you'd be surprised how wonderful just the people in your everyday life can be. And that's what I get out of this. So please enjoy today's show with Jax. Know that this just spurned from a random introduction and paying attention and asking a few questions, and now I've got a friendship out of it, and I hope you will too after listening to this show. So I'm going to deliver it to you, and we'll catch you on the back end. Hello, and welcome to the Answers Yes podcast. We're ready for another show, another great guest with the background. I love mixing it up, man. We've had singers and all sorts of different types of business people, retreats, and today I've got something completely different, and that is I've got Jax on the line. Jax, would you call yourself, you're a PI, right, a private investigator?
Yep, a private investigator.
Now, I like that title, but I also, it's kind of PI / actor, producer. You've had some successful series on, was it the Discovery Channel in Alaska? I mean,
History Channel.
On the History, okay. Sorry, you've done a little bit of everything there, buddy.
Yeah, you know, I just take what God puts right before me and run with it.
So as a PI, do you stay busy? And what state are you working out of right now?
My company's primarily based out of Arizona, but we do a lot of work in Montana also. So that kind of gets us everything in between. We do some work in Utah and Idaho, but primarily we're out of Arizona, Phoenix metro area.
Yeah, now I was introduced to you probably 6 months ago or so, and I was so intrigued by the fact that you were a PI, but then I saw this thing about your show Missing in Alaska. I'm like, this is a guy that I got to call and get to know a little bit, especially as I was starting to build my roster of guests that I wanted on here. So thanks for taking the call a long time ago and allowing me to get to know you a little bit better. But it seems like
of course.
If I follow you on social media, you're a busy guy right now. You got a lot of stuff going on.
It seems that way. I mean, I just don't have time for television. You know what I mean? Yeah, everyone always asks, have you seen this show? You seen this show? And it's like, I don't know when the last time it was I turned my television on. You know, you just take things that life's got in front of you and, you know, been through a lot and seen a lot. And, you know, our time on this earth is very limited. So I try to grasp everything that's in front of me, which sometimes is included things that are really outside my realm, such as acting and, you know, now getting this to production and directing. And then also, you know, my television show I had on the History Channel, that was just something that completely came out of nowhere, but it was a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
Yeah, and I got to mention, too, because I've had the chance to meet your boys, you're a father of two, and it seems like they're such a major, major part of who you are and what you do. I'm very impressed with your ability to juggle all the above.
Well, I'm actually a father of three.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I got a little guy, too. I got twin boys that are 13 going on 20 and a 5-year-old going on 20. So you know how that goes.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. And you've done a lot of travel over the summer, and I see your pictures from Montana. You know, like you said, you're just a busy guy, and you're showing your kids the world, and I can appreciate that as a father, the value that brings to those guys.
Well, I'm sure you agree with this, but it seems like our kids are more and more in front of a little screen or a big screen, but most of the time now it's their phones, and that's where they're learning stuff. And if you don't take the opportunity to talk with them and show them things and let them use their other senses and their eyes, I think it's a real loss for our next generation. And things are just disappearing too, right underneath them, and things that they won't get to experience.
Yeah. So, as you know, the premise for this show is saying yes to opportunities in life or things that are in front of you. Clearly, you've got a couple big yeses that are interesting to me, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners, about not only being an investigator, but having a show on the History Channel and some of these neat things that you're working on now. But what I'm curious is, how did you get started in all this? I mean, where did your career begin that eventually led you down this road? Because I don't remember a class in school to be a PI or be on the History Channel.
No, it's definitely something very unique. Well, I've always been interested in, I was a kid always playing cops and robbers, and I was the cop, that kind of thing. In college, I did some loss prevention work, and then 20 years old, went to the police academy and got hired up in Northern California, up in the Redwoods, a small department. And, so I was in law enforcement from a very young age. So I have always done something investigative for the most part in my adult life. So I just always had a love for solving puzzles and catching the bad guy. And, that's evolved into even more things like catching people that are just bad, period. May not necessarily be criminal, but people are just not good. It's fun to, unmask those people to society. So it's just, those things have turned into great joys. But the investigating has just been something that's been part of me forever. But I was very fortunate as a young man. I got to be in a department that a chief of police didn't really believe in having detectives because we were too small. And so he believed that every one of his street cops should be very schooled down in investigation. So about once a quarter, we were in some form of investigative course or class to increase our abilities as street cops and as investigators. So that really set me on my path of, enjoying the more complicated investigations than just street work.
Interesting. Did you come straight out of high school or college and go right into law enforcement, or did you have other career jobs along the way?
Well, like I said, I was in loss prevention. I worked for Sears while I was in college. And then at 20 years old, just right into the police academy. So it was, like I said, most of my adult life I've been in some form of investigations.
Yeah, clearly. Working on the department with that type of mentality from your chief and directing you guys to be investigators, did you find a lot of success in your career there because of that extra ability or that mindset? I mean, that set you apart from maybe other departments?
I felt like it did. I felt like I always had the one up, even though I was coming from a small department and, you go to classes or trainings with, a bigger agency, and there's always that kind of looking down on the little departments and stuff like that. You still get a lot of that. But, I always felt like stepping into the room, I could handle anything because of how much education and training we had received. And that always seemed to be the truth. And we used to get brought in from other local agencies to assist in their investigations because of, how in depth we've been trained.
Yeah. What, obviously there came a point where you left, police work, but what would be your advice to people that are thinking about police work in this day and age? People coming out of college or maybe they're going to skip college and go straight into law enforcement. What are your thoughts and advices that you'd give nowadays?
Well, that's a tough one, and I don't know necessarily it's pro law enforcement. I have friends obviously that are still on the job, and I feel like their lives are miserable. I think they're in more danger than ever, and they're also not just in danger of physical harm, but also in danger of civil issues with being sued all the time. And that's always been there, but there's been a massive increase in the last 10 years. Where we've kind of focused on our law enforcement who, have been our heroes. While we sleep at night, they keep us protected. And now they're villainized. And, a few bad apples are always going to be in any group. I know the guys and gals that I worked with were amazing people. I never worked with a bad apple, but, one bad apple makes it all over national news.
Yeah.
And the whole occupation's lumped in. and that's, the advent of cameras and stuff have helped, but it also hinders. I was a narcotics officer, and I can't imagine of ever doing my job with that camera on. I would have probably been fired very quickly, just because of the role you have to play in those type of scenarios in order to get the job done. And law enforcement's losing that. They're losing those abilities to combat certain crimes and go after certain crimes because things are getting so structured. It almost feels like we're kind of getting to the point where we start heading towards that, London and England type law enforcement where, they have a set of check boxes they go to on every call, which is very unsafe because if you're thinking about things that are not your safety at first, that's when you get hurt. Because the bad guy has the upper hand because he controls when that occurs. And if you're thinking about all these other things and boxes to check, then you're not really going to be on your safety as much as you should be. So, well, I think it's a very honorable occupation, and I pray very hard we just had a Glendale PD officer here in Arizona. He lost his life a couple of days ago. It's an honorable occupation, an occupation that gives the ultimate sacrifice at times. And I would support my children going into it. It's just a very, very hard occupation. It's hard on relationships. I think it's like 78, 80% of marriages in law enforcement and in divorce, which is an extremely high percentage if you think about it.
Yeah, wow.
It's just very hard. It's hard on families. I know when my oldest two were younger, I missed a lot of their lives. And I'm thankful to be out of law enforcement now because there's so much I missed, in court, working graveyard shifts and all that stuff, constantly. I was really good at what I did, so I was always working overtime, always report writing, always in court, and I just missed a lot. And so, you have to realize those things when you're going in to an occupation like that. Sometimes I wish I'd become a firefighter because, everybody loves them.
Well, I was in the unique position when I graduated high school. My dad was a retired sheriff, and I thought that that's what I wanted to be. And fortunately for me, my brother was in a career, a lot of people know this, with In-N-Out Burger, and I went that route and worked for In-N-Out Burger. But, one of the things he said to me why he didn't want me to go into law enforcement, he says, it's not what it used to be. And this was in the 80s. And,
yeah.
You're almost saying the same thing. 30, 40 years later, it's not what it used to be, or it's not, the most desirable position to be in. Although honorable does not make it any better or easier to obtain the position and be happy with it,
Correct. I find it funny that the television shows that we love, that people put out there on law enforcement are always this proactive officers doing these things.
Yeah.
But the job is extremely reactive and behind the crime. The proactive, there are some units out there for proactive activity, that they create in larger departments especially. But the action part of the job it's so much CYA. Everyone's afraid to get sued. Everything's slowed down, and those adrenaline, even in my career in 12 years in law enforcement, throughout that time, got less and less. Less pursuits, less foot pursuits, less combative things, and you're always behind those incidents because it's almost like they wanted you to be behind them. Yeah. And those are the reasons a lot of people get into law enforcement. I mean, I was a breacher on the SWAT team, so I had to break the door down. There's no more adrenaline than that, And so you crave those instances, but I noticed those instances got less and less as I went through my career.
Yeah, interesting. Well, we on the show are appreciative of your service that you gave us back when you were in law enforcement, and all those that are in law enforcement listening right now. We appreciate your service. We're very
absolutely,
pro-servicemen and firemen, and got a lot of fire department guys that listen to this show. We really appreciate the work that they do. I don't think there's enough credit for civil servants out there. And
oh yeah, not at all.
As you mentioned,
and that's the hard part. That's like you're talking about someone giving you that advice is that that appreciation has just gotten so thin.
Yeah.
And the respect level has gotten thin in those areas for those people that give up their time with their families and time, literally putting their lives on the line.
It's interesting when you say that. my wife is very pro civil servant, and she took our kids down to the local police department as the Upland PD.